The circumstances of the offense are allegedly egregious.
New trouble for a fire lieutenant and his wife accused of abusing a foster child. There are new charges and more allegations involving their own children. But one of their attorneys says the facts are on the parent's side. I'll explain. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. From the outside looking in, Joel and Jennifer Conert look like the perfect parents in a large family. Joel was a fire lieutenant at the Broward Sheriff's Fire Rescue. Jennifer was a stay-at-home mom. The couple had 5 biological children, and they were also fostering a child, a girl, from the time she was a baby until she was 12 years old. On Facebook, the Conerts looked picture perfect. But the state attorney in Broward County says there was something awful going on behind the photos and behind closed doors. The claim? The 12-year-old girl the Conerts had fostered since she was a baby was being singled out in the home and mistreated. The girl, according to the prosecutor, was being tortured. A detective wrote in a probable cause affidavit, on February 11th, 2026, a Department of Children and Families investigator responded to the resource officer regarding allegations that blank was locked in her bedroom at night due to claims that she wandered the house and took items from the family members. The intake further indicated that during this period, the child did not have access to a bathroom, resulting in her urinating on the floor and being forced to clean it the following morning. The intake also noted that the child was required to write Bible verses as a form of punishment. So this is just the beginning of what the state attorney says was torture. Investigators with Children's Services interviewed the girl twice over the span of 2 days. They said things the girl told them raised serious concerns. The investigator wrote, during these interviews, the child disclosed that for approximately 2 to 3 years, she had been locked in her bedroom overnight and at times during the day. She stated that while confined overnight, she urinates on herself and at times defecates on herself due to lack of access to a bathroom. The child reported that in the morning, she is required to bathe outside in the backyard while wearing a bathing suit despite inadequate weather conditions. Investigators said they also spoke with the biological children of the Conerts. A detective wrote, I interviewed all of the children residing in the home who are the biological children of Jennifer and Joel. These children confirmed that the child is locked in her room overnight, urinates and defecates on herself, and is required to bathe outside and wash her clothing. All siblings advised that they are not subjected to that type of punishment. They reported that the child spent a majority of her time isolated in her room, writing proverbs, and is rarely allowed to participate in normal family activities such as eating meals and playing with siblings. So investigators say the Conerts' biological children told them the girl was being isolated and kept in her room where she's forced to write proverbs. The investigators then turned their attention to the Conerts. The affidavit states Jennifer agreed to speak with me and was advised of the DCF allegations. Jennifer admitted to locking the child in her room overnight and acknowledged that the child has been urinating and defecating on herself for approximately 2 to 3 years. Jennifer confirmed that the child is required to write proverbs as punishment and that she is required to bathe and wash her clothing outside with limited access to indoor facilities. Jennifer acknowledged that these practices were unusual. Jennifer also stated that the victim would not thrive in her care and is willing to turn her back over to the state of Florida, although Jennifer and Joel have been her caretaker since she was 2 months old. Then investigators said they went and spoke with Joel Conert. The detective wrote in the affidavit during the interview, Joel acknowledged that there were safety concerns associated with the victim's bedroom door and window being secured in a manner that restricted her ability to exit. This practice is particularly concerning, and given Joel's professional background, where he would reasonably be expected to recognize the inherent safety risk is associated with restricting a child's ability to exit a room during an emergency. All of this information from the children and Joel and Jennifer formed the basis for the initial aggravated child abuse charge, but the investigation and review by prosecutors continued. And Jennifer and Joel, they were back in court this week, and they now face additional charges of child neglect and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The delinquency of a minor charge states that a child did observe and or was encouraged to participate in the physical, mental, and or emotional abuse of a sibling. So the Conerts are now accused of encouraging their own children to take part in the abuse of their foster sibling.
Where they confirmed the information that was provided by the victim child as to the restrictions on her eating,
Going to trial today?
restrictions on her
Good luck.
movement, her being locked in her bedroom, and various other details. And that is why the additional counts for additional victims have been added as well. So there is a medical portion to this that has been uncovered since the original arrest, and there has been evidence of it being the other minor children in the household being aware and exposed to the abuse of their sibling.
Jennifer Conert's lawyer asked that she be allowed to remain free on bond.
I want to call the court's attention to this, because what I'm requesting is, my client has no prior record. She has two children at home, two adult children that are waiting for her. There is a pending case with the children, which is now, apparently there's an agreement that's going to be settled.
This is a dependency
Correct.
court.
Exactly.
Okay?
And I want to call attention to the court that with no prior record, my client at the magistrate hearing, the public defender at that time asked for a $15,000 bond on first count. The state of Florida asked for a $50,000 bond. The magistrate on their own required a $100,000 bond. Okay, so there's a very large bond amount in this case already.
Jennifer's attorney offered a possible defense claiming the foster child may have been violent.
I would suggest to the court that my client could be placed on pretrial release on the other counts. I don't believe there is a necessity for an ankle monitor. They haven't been on an ankle monitor to this point, and they've been perfectly law-abiding and following all the rules as defined. And I would also just to refute something the prosecutor said, the reason that the biological children don't want to have contact with the alleged victim in this case is because they were threatened to be stabbed by her. So there's actually a valid factual reason why that is, not the inference the state is making that somehow the parents are somehow having influence on their children not to have contact with the child. So that's just not the case, and the evidence will be borne out by that.
Jennifer Conert testified briefly about her current circumstances. It's difficult to hear, so we put some subtitles on it.
How many hours a week are you working?
The magistrate allowed Jennifer Conert to remain free on bail.
The circumstances of the offense are allegedly egregious. The penalty upon conviction and the weight of the evidence against the defendant in this matter weighs heavy on this court. However, the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty at trial. And under the circumstances, the penalty on count 1 is 30 years in prison, count 2, 15 years in prison, and individual counts of 5 years, of individual terms of 5 years in prison on counts 3 to 6. As to the defendant's family ties, in this case, I have heard limited information as to that. However, I do understand that there are 4 minor children that are biological children and 1 adopted child who is the alleged victim in this case. Length of residence in the community, extensive. As to employment history, prior from Mr. Conert is a firefighter. I understand currently on restricted leave with the Department of Coral Springs. As to financial resources, limited. Mental condition, not a factor. Prior convictions, not a factor. Previous flight to avoid prosecution, no such information provided. Failure to appear at court proceedings, clearly that is not the case, as Conert has been here at every proceeding. Danger to the defendant's releases to opposes to the community. This particular factor, this court does have a concern as to the potential influence that the parents can have on biological children vis-a-vis their relationship with their adopted sibling. However, in order to address those particular concerns, whether I set a bond or pretrial services in this matter, it is going to be the imperative purpose of setting the restrictions is going to ensure that there is compliance with the dependency proceedings. That is the court's orders that are in effect that will impact the visitations as well as any interaction between the parents as well as the biological children and the adopted child. As to the other factors, this is not a controlled substance issue, and intimidation to the victim falls on my previous analysis. Based on the totality of the circumstances, count 1 remains at $100,000. Counts 2, 3, 6, pretrial services, level 2 with a GPS monitor, and special conditions, stay away from the victim, no victim contact, all original conditions of bond remain in effect. That is the court's order for counts 3 to 6. Ma'am, would you kindly prepare that order? Ma'am, please do not leave the courtroom, okay? You are not being taken into custody at this time. However, you will be served by one of the deputies with the capias. All right? Thank you very much.
Then it was Joel Konert's turn to face the judge.
Special condition, no victim contact, stay away order. The defendant may not have any contact with the victims either in person, through third parties, or through social media. All original conditions are remain in effect. Mr. Konert, please do not leave the courtroom. You are not being taken into custody at this time. However, you will be served by a deputy with the case. All right, thank you very much, sir. All right, Mr. Jacobo, is there anything else on behalf of your client?
Nothing else, Your Honor. Thank you so much.
Have a very good day, Mr. Jacobo. Thank you very much. All right.
You too.
So I'd like to bring in Kesia Early. She's a criminal defense attorney in Florida who actually is based in Broward County, where this case is taking place. She's also a candidate for the 22nd House District down there in Florida. Kesia, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me, Anjanette.
You know, you and I, before we started recording here, we're talking about how horrific these allegations are. We already have a child who's in the system, a foster child, and she was with this family from the time she was a baby, according to what the prosecutors have said. But then between, I guess, 2023 and 2026, they're saying she was subjected to this awful, awful abuse.
Yeah, these allegations are absolutely horrible. And I do not believe that that is the only time frame that they decided to be monsters. I believe that this has been ongoing. Unfortunately, in this case, we don't have sufficient evidence, and maybe that's why the prosecution decided to just stick with that time frame for purposes of trying this case. But when you hear these allegations of this foster child not only being abused, but her other siblings being subjected to viewing this abuse or participating, it gets even worse. And then to find out that these parents claim to be Christians and they're doing this in the name of religion just blows us out of the water. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into that. Let's take this first piece of the puzzle. They interviewed the girl. They interviewed the 12-year-old girl over the course of 2 days back in February. And it says that this girl said that for 2 to 3 years, she had been locked in her bedroom overnight at times during the day, that she was confined overnight. She urinates on herself and at times defecates on herself due to the lack of access to a bathroom. The child reported in the morning she's required to bathe outside in the backyard wearing a bathing suit, despite the weather being not adequate. The biological children also confirmed this information according to what was in the original probable cause affidavit. I'm at a loss here because even if you have a foster child, Kesia, who might be having some issues, who might be acting out, I would think you would have a duty to then take that child to the pediatrician or take that child to a counselor. And we can see if there's something more going on here. Does she have mental health needs?
Of course. And for the viewers, let's back it up a little bit. So we have mom and dad, Jennifer and Joel, who has this foster child. And over the course of years, not only do they confine her to a room, there's a lock on the outside of the door. She's not allowed to use the restroom. So she would defecate or urinate on herself. And then in the morning, she's forced to clean it up, take a bath outside. In addition, some of her siblings would witness this on a daily, ongoing basis. And I have the information here, and some of the allegations for the aggravated child abuse included willful torture, malicious punishment, unlawful caging, restricted diet. She wasn't allowed to eat certain foods as her siblings, depriving access not only to the bathroom, but to other parts of the house. But what's even more egregious is that the parents would play this sound noise in her room so she would not have the access to hear what's going on in the outside. So this is beyond extreme torture, which is why she was charged with aggravated child abuse, first-degree felony, and they're looking at upwards of 30 years Florida State Prison, and you have neglect of a child, and that's a third-degree felony. I suspect that the prosecution is going all the way. I don't care if these are first-time offenders. You do not treat a child in this manner, whether it's your biological child or a foster child. If you cannot love, care, pour into that child, you should not be a parent. And just like you said, Anjanette, they had many options. If they were afraid that she was stealing or making threats to harm any of the other children, there are avenues that you take. And for Lieutenant Joel, who is Broward Sheriff Office, lieutenant for the fire and rescue team, obviously he knew better. And this calls into question, do we really know our neighbors? So we pray for those children and the other children as well.
And he lost his job. He's no longer employed with the Broward County Sheriff's. I mean, how could they keep him, right, with these allegations? And of course, he's innocent until proven guilty. These are allegations. But law enforcement is saying the other children backed up what this girl was saying.
Yeah. Listen, as a criminal defense attorney who's tried over 100 trials to verdict, I can just read the probable cause affidavit and know the direction of this case. I don't care what my client tells me. I always tell them, I don't believe you. I believe the evidence, and I follow where the evidence takes me. And just as you stated, it's not just the child. Thank goodness that she was homeschooled. This is how it came out. She was homeschooled, and then she enrolled into public school, and she told someone. If she didn't release this information to anyone, who knows how long this torture could have been going on. So, looking at the probable cause affidavit and looking at the evidence that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, this shows that, this is a heavy case against them, whether or not the defense has taken the claim that they're innocent and these are just, erroneous allegations.
And let's look at it from the defense point of view now. Jennifer's defense attorney said in court, basically, oh, she was trying to harm, all the facts will come out. Some of the other children are with people that have a guardian ad litem who might be biased. And he's saying all of these things. But he's claiming, well, she had a school physical. So she had been to the doctor. A school physical doesn't really cut it. As a parent, you're required or supposed to be taking your child to the pediatrician once a year for an actual physical with their pediatrician. A school physical, I don't think cuts it.
This is beyond physical abuse. We're talking about mental abuse, the social abuse that's been going on. She has been isolated in a room. And then on top of that, all of the torture that she endured. This is going to take years of counseling, mental health counseling specifically, so she can unravel what has been going on and to let her know this was not natural. This was not supposed to happen to you. For goodness sake, she's already in the system. And this is why we need social services to continually not only check on the household, especially if you're in the system, but make sure that there's wellness checks, some form of check and balance so that we will not allow this to happen continuously. We are supposed to serve and protect our children. And this, unfortunately, it's a surprise. I mean, Coral Springs is a middle-class neighborhood, and we know crime happens everywhere, and we don't know what happens behind closed doors. But some of the neighbors had a hunch that maybe something could have been going on in the home. The parents kept her isolated. She wasn't allowed to make any friends, but they did not have enough to report. So we don't want to blame the neighbors for not doing more because it happened behind closed doors.
Yeah, no doubt. There are additional charges that have now been added, Kesia. When the Conerts were originally arrested, they were charged with aggravated child abuse. There have been other charges added now, including neglect of a child and also contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And that is because the prosecutors are saying they encouraged their biological children to actually take part in some of this abuse toward the foster sister. So the foster daughter. And I'm like, whoa. So that information, we already know that they interviewed the biological children who confirmed what the foster child said. But they were being encouraged to obviously take part in this abuse according to the charges. And they're all allegations. The Conerts have pleaded not guilty. But wow.
Yeah.
That is very powerful evidence, I think.
It is. And those are the 3 additional charges contributing to a delinquency of a minor, in addition to the neglect of a child and aggravated child abuse. And for cases like this, I pulled up both Joelle and Jennifer's history. We don't see any prior criminal history. And based on my experience, this is how this case is going to go. No prior criminal history. That's a great mitigation for some form of plea resolution. When evidence is so overwhelming, obviously you enter a plea of not guilty initially, and then you start working up the case. You do a demand for discovery, a demand for Brady disclosure. Once you look at all the information, if I had a case like this, we would have a real sit-down meeting with both mom and dad, whether it is a co-defendant attorney, and we tell them the pros and cons, because there's really only 2 choices. You go to trial, evidence like this, you're going to be put away for the rest of your life, or you evaluate them, get them a mental evaluation, do a comprehensive evaluation. Why did this happen? And then present a mitigation packet to the state. And you're looking at possibly a probation term, or even if it's a county sentence, but a lengthy probation sentence to ensure that they get the treatment that they deserve. But most importantly, take those children out of the home. They do not belong there. There's no form of rehabilitation. You've already tortured them enough. You already abused them psychologically and physically, and you are not fit to be parents. And this should be a lesson to anyone, whether you are a biological parent or a parent seeking to have a child out of the foster care system. If you cannot take care of these children, let someone else do it. There's ways that you can give those children to a loving home, but this cannot be tolerated. And as a prosecutor, I would seek a lengthy term of probation and jail to ensure that we save our children. Their priority.
Yeah, it's just so, the allegations are so disturbing and gross to me, especially because Jennifer was a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. So you're a stay-at-home mom and you're taking care of your children. And who knows if her own children will tell tales about not being treated right. But I'm thinking to myself, you're a stay-at-home mom. So basically your job, if you will, is to care for children, being a mother. And this sounds like she failed in more ways than one, according to what the prosecutors are saying.
This sounds like demonic behavior covered under the guise of a Christian household. There is no explanation for this. And again, yes, they're innocent until proven guilty, but oftentimes the evidence speaks louder than the position of the plea that is being entered. You do not say that this is for religious practices. You are not allowed to say that Jesus is king, because Jesus is Lord and Jesus is love. And everything about this case is opposite of that. So, to utilize religion or the practice of their Christianity, it makes absolutely no sense. And we're going to follow this case more to see how it ends, but I'm pretty sure I have an idea.
Yeah, it's disturbing to say the least. Kesia Early, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So the Conerts remain free on bail, the bail that they've already posted. They are barred from having any contact with the alleged victims in this case, including their own children. Their trials are set for August, and those charges carry a possible penalty of 30 years in prison on the aggravated child abuse charge, 15 years on the child neglect charge, and possibly 5 years on the contributing to the delinquency of a minor charges. We'll keep an eye on it and let you know what happens. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.